Everest, Chapter 9. It happened just before midnight. The quiet of the slumbering sports complex was shattered by a deafening clatter. It woke every sleeper. Cap Zero, still hopping into a pair of sweatpants, exploded into the hall with every ounce of the determination that had propelled him up the Matterhorn during the famous blizzard of 1998. Perry appeared at the doorway of the room he shared with Tilt. What was that? Go back to bed, roared Zero, pounding down the hall. He wheeled around the corner, narrowly avoiding a collision with Sneezy. Calm down, the cameraman/guide exclaimed. Nobody's hurt. Zero looked past him to the utility closet. The door was open, and mops, brooms, and pails were scattered everywhere, along with bottles of detergent, floor wax, and bleach. Zero picked up a deck mop and stormed up and down the corridor, banging on the doors. Maybe you're used to cushy guidance counselors and child psychologists who think that busting up people's property is a cry for help. I work in a place where there isn't any vandalism because every ounce of energy has to go to keeping yourself and your teammates alive. If Summit came to me today and asked, "Is your team ready to go?" I'd have to say no, because any idiot who thinks it's fun to trash a broom closet has no place on that mountain. And 2 weeks from now, I'll say the same thing and scrap this expedition. Don't think I won't. He tossed the mop back into the closet and stormed off. I'll wake up maintenance, Sneezy called after him. In the gloom of her dorm room, Sammy Moon's face wore an oddly stricken expression. It was not Cap's speech that had her upset, nor was it even the grim prospect of having Summit Quest cancelled. She gazed across the sparsely furnished space at Bryn's bed. Her roommate was not there. Dominic lay for a long time after the disturbance, trying to empty his mind, and will find himself back to sleep. This was weakness on an expedition. The ability to rest was as important as a good ice axe. Look at Chris in the other bed. His brother was out like a light, and had been since 30 seconds after his head hit the pillow. The dim red glow of a digital clock on the nightstand read 2:11. Resolutely, he got out of bed, pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, and shrugged into a downed ski jacket. Carrying his boots, he tiptoed out the door and down the hall into the darkened equipment room. He didn't risk a light. The locker room was directly across from the courtyard. From the security desk by reception. He felt around behind the door until his hand closed on a helmet lamp. He pulled it from its wall peg, then sat down on the floor, laced it on his boots, and let himself out the side entrance into the frigid night. Had Dominic turned on a light in the equipment room, he would have seen that there were post-it notes. Washout notes, they now called them, on 4 lockers. One of them was his. He made his way over to the rise, and when he was out of sight of the building, switched on the lamp. Light flooded the snowy terrain ahead of him. The trees cast unnaturally long shadows like eerie pointers, showing the way down into the valley where the great mushroom stood. That had been his destination all along. When Dominic was restless, the answer was always the same: go climb something. All at once he halted in his tracks and switched off the torch. Ahead of him, the mushroom was bathed in light. Someone was up there. Staying in cover of the trees, Dominic moved slowly forward. The ATV was parked 30 feet away. On the back of it was a portable floodlight, its bright beam illuminating the problem. Suspended there, dangling from the handhold on the underside of the crown, was Cap Zero. Dominic's first impulse was to turn on his heels and run for the complex. Instead, he stayed riveted to the spot. This was one of America's top alpinists climbing. He watched in awe as Zero managed to gain a boot in the fissure. Then, hanging upside down, he literally created a hold out of thin air by wedging the side of his hand up against a 1/4-inch ridge in the rock. Dominic let out his breath and realized he'd been holding it. It was a brilliant move that required amazing wrist strength. Maybe one climber in 100 could even have seen it was possible, let alone pulled it off. But he noted, Ciro was still too far from the edge of the mushroom to have a shot at the top. Spectacular as it was, this wasn't the move that would solve the problem. Ciro retreated to the stem and began to climb down. Suddenly he froze. Who's out there? Escape crossed Dominic's mind only briefly. Surely he had no right to be here in the middle of the night, but somehow he had the feeling that a true climber would understand. He stepped into the light. Ciro was surprised, and not pleasantly. Alexis, are you crazy? It's 2:30 in the morning. Then it occurred to him that there might be a confession coming. He descended the slope pedestal and leaned against it to catch his breath. Dominic approached him, squinting against the powerful beam of the floodlight. So what's on your mind, kid? Ciro prompted. I couldn't get back to sleep, Dominic admitted. Sometimes my brain just goes wild, and I think about a million things, one after the other. Tonight it kept coming back to this rock. So I thought I could, I don't know, study it or something? Ciro flushed with anger. Not on my watch. You're supposed to be training, mister, and... He stopped himself. Dominic wasn't in training anymore. Ciro himself had placed the post-it on the kid's locker. What was the point of being mad at him? Even if it turned out that Dominic was the Summit Quest vandal and responsible for leaking information to the National Daily, he was leaving tomorrow. It didn't matter if he was guilty of insomnia or a whole lot more. He was gone. Ciro inclined his head toward the boulder. It's a tough one, he agreed, but to tackle it solo in the dark... In answer, Dominic clicked on his helmet lamp. And you came here alone, he pointed out. Ciro had to laugh. What, you don't think I've got the credentials? Dominic quoted from memory. Summer 1998. Cap Ciro climbs every important peak in the Alps in 6 weeks. I had good weather, the team leader said, embarrassed. Dominic clambered up the pedestal and worked his way over to the stem of the mushroom. Ciro looked into the sky in exasperation. I thought I was speaking English. It must have been Cantonese. Yet he couldn't help but watch as the young climber moved efficiently up the problem. You won't make it to that handhold, he predicted. You haven't got the wingspan. Here. He shined up the stem to Dominic and positioned himself to provide a platform to get the boy within reach of the fissure. With a grunt of thanks, Dominic was able to make it up the cleft in the rock, using Ciro's knees as a step-off point. Then, carefully but with confidence, he duplicated the team leader's move. As he hung there upside down, the helmet lamp fell off his head and shattered on the pedestal below. See, said Ciro, if it wasn't for my light, you'd be in the dark right now, alone. Wait a second, and I'll give you a hand getting down. I can do it. The voice was not even strained. Slowly exhibiting remarkable muscle control, Dominic reversed the move, but instead of swinging back down to the artificial ledge provided by Ciro's knees, he launched himself directly up the stem, catching on and sticking, Spider-Man style. Ciro replayed the reverse move and dismount with wide eyes. Of course, it wasn't impossible. He had just witnessed it. But someone of Dominic's size should not have that kind of strength, not to mention the guts to try something like that. Get in the car, he said gruffly. As soon as they drove off in the ATV, Ciro noticed that Dominic didn't face front until the boulder was out of sight. Ciro fretted over the steering wheel. Dominic was cut, finished, gone, and yet the team leader couldn't get the kid out of his head. He thought, is it wrong to let the boy stay in his boot camp when he has absolutely no chance of making the team? Is it fair to keep him around just because I like him and I want to see what he'll do next? The next morning, the 9 candidates awoke to find only 3 post-it notes in the equipment room. 3 more Everest hopefuls were going home. Dominic Alexis was not one of them.